Rimworld was always a difficult game. For those who haven't played it, it's now one of the de facto standards in terms of colony management. You choose a survival scenario, and the game brings a story-building aspect of world events that'll affect you in a variety of positive, negative, and questionable ways. Today, we're going to dive into Ideology, the newest DLC release for Rimworld, which adds entirely new concepts into the mix. Whether you're looking to create a colony of raiders who steal what they need, transhumanists who aim to replace the majority of their human parts with cybernetics, maybe some underground cave people, or cannibals, the list goes on. The idea of Ideology is that you can do just that, with rituals, rules, and events that work themselves into your colony almost like a religion in most cases. You can do this with or without mods, and you can do it with or without the royalty DLC, which really does make your experience very unique. Before anything else, I'd warn those of you who fancy themselves experts on the Rim, you're going to want to drop difficulty settings and get away from commitment mode for the first few runs here, in all likelihood. Ideology adds a lot to your game, but it also adds expectations to your colony and your colonists that you may not always be able to meet. When that happens, you have a raider who hasn't raided in a while, or an undergrounder forced to be outside due to the situation, you can expect your colonists to feel some type of way about it. Of course, in most games, stress is more manageable. On the Rim, a single angry colonist may just decide to kill everyone in their sleep, or light your base on fire. You never really know how violently pawns are going to react. The long and short of these new ideologies is that they remain a big focus for you as a player at times, especially if you choose to include the more difficult memes. As we go through the process of creating an ideology, you choose the symbolism behind it, the memes which become the major tenets of the practice. And those are things like raiding, supremacy ideas, communism, whatever you want. If you start like I did with a fluid choice, you can also continue to alter your ideology as the game progresses. You might notice right away that everything here is a limiting choice. The impact of your choice is extremely relevant. After you've selected a meme, you can see the precepts of your practice and alter things accordingly if you want. You can even go as far as venerating certain animals, weapons, and standardizing clothing. But this also covers concepts like how your colonists perceive things like slavery, how they feel about cannibalism, and can even direct what they're allowed to eat. In some ways, this is a huge step forward for players who always wanted to set up a cannibal colony, for example. Before the DLC, not every new wanderer or pawn would have been on board to eat folk. Through the process of conversion, you have a method that helps you to get each new colonist aligned with the main ideals of the colony if you want. I will say it's possible to have multiple ideologies in a single colony, and it looks like the dev has even taken some steps to make that more feasible, but if I'm being honest, even one ideology is hard to deal with. Trying to juggle two or more kinda sounds like a nightmare in my experience. The nature of Rimworld is chaos. Regardless of your storyteller, the game isn't going to be affording you the opportunities you'll likely need without really pushing through. The element of randomness in the base game was already a massive challenge, so you can imagine playing with the same goals but additional liabilities just makes things more difficult. While I love the ideas at play here, as a player it's a very difficult thing to justify further handcuffing yourself. These fluid ideologies, as an example, allow you to earn points through your actions, and then in turn, edit your ideology. When given the option to use points to edit the ideology, as if you're awarded something, your options are simply more and more limitations. It seems a strange concept of a goal to work towards to implement further restrictions. New construction objects that are much more specific to certain ideologies become available through regular research tree progression, but there is an incredibly small number of advantages to any of them. Transhumanists, as an example, are expected to use biosculpting pods every 60 days in-game, or they get upset. Those pods are great for medical emergencies, but they become non-optional in a transhuman colony if you really want to survive the long run. They're expensive, they consume a lot of power, and they of course take up space. It creates an interesting challenge, but it's hard to justify starting a transhuman colony when just about anyone can get those bionic body parts without issue. The only advantage to transhumanists is less time within the pods when they need them. The difficulty in the game traditionally has been tied to the wealth of the colony. Everything is worth something, and if you get raided, for example, the number of raiders and weapon types would have been representative of that number. To survive in the past, you'd try to be as prepared as possible. And if you really wanted to min-max, you'd try to control your wealth through clever trades so things didn't get out of control. That concept still exists, of course. You don't have to play with ideologies in place, but this new DLC shifts more of the danger to your colony to within, rather than a majority of the threats coming from outside. In the past, a wanderer might join who happens to be a pyromaniac. Today, that could still happen, but they'll almost always have an opposing ideology as well, instantly making them upset in many cases. There's a number of instances like this where the new ideology system really hurts. Conversion seems more effective with 2 or more people involved, so you can imagine the one rich explorer scenario immediately has an additional challenge whenever you get a second pawn. 2 pawns just trying to convert each other has a similar effect to real life. Everybody just gets upset. Is the game becoming too hard to play with these challenges? No, I don't think so. I think there's still some balance changes that need to take place, but a prepared player can actually have a lot more fun pushing themselves to new limits. This DLC has the potential to change the game significantly for those who want to try a whole new way of playing, and the ability to keep an older game fresh is certainly something to celebrate. The classic Rimworld experience, even with royalty, the safest way to play would be to over-prepare. In the old days, I found myself turtled in a base most of the time because caravans are a huge liability. They take colonists away that you might need for defense, and they themselves are more vulnerable in the wild. When I specifically started a raiding colony, however, I got the chance to play Rimworld in a way that I'd never played before, and I found myself having a great time in the process. Playing through the game in these new ways helped me develop some new, fun strategies as well, and I'm finding myself taking more risk than ever before. Again, disable commitment mode until you get some of these loftier concepts down, but some of these new quests and maps are pretty awesome. My raiding colony took up the quest to try to locate their holy weapon, and I continually had to travel to hack different terminals for further information. Ideology isn't going to be an upgrade in everyone's opinion. I think it hits different for a certain personality type, and it's certainly one of those things for more advanced players, as opposed to something you'd want with your very first colony. In my history with DLC in general, though, it definitely stands out as something very different. These aren't just new maps, or expanded content for the base game. This is a more critical choice you make when you start a game, and it determines and influences how you intend to play. I could even see players maybe choosing to occasionally disable it, to mix things up. That said, if you are that person who wants to challenge themselves to create a raiding colony, a group of nomads, or even a collective of potheads to see how far you can make it on the rim, this one might just be for you. Ideology involves roles that individual colonists will need to take on. A spiritual leader, for example, will be able to try to convert people or preach in a variety of ways. Similar to royalty, these roles will have restrictions on a per colonist basis. These pawns will need to dress the part, they'll need to be treated according to their station to stay happy, but this more quickly opens up additional skill options with single pawns that took a far longer time with royalty alone. Compared to the concept of meditation and psi-casting, this system is easier to understand and use, and it's just time-based in most cases. The leadership and psi-casting systems can be used together if you choose, creating very important pawns that you would definitely want to avoid having take a bullet. These pawn leaders will also be the ones conducting festivals and rituals as needed, because there's going to be expectations surrounding those things as well. If they go well, you can get a really nice morale boost through an invigorating leader speech, a beautiful conversion ritual, or a memorable Sky Lantern festival. Ideology gives your colony an actual culture where nothing existed before, and that in itself is an incredibly cool concept. At the same time, making individual pawns more critical also hurts you far worse when something happens to them. So, like everything else on the Rim, there's definitely cons to go with those pros. Recommending this one is tough, because it's meant to be a struggle. If you love Rimworld and love a challenge, it's certainly got appeal to it. You could tell though that a lot of thought, preparation, and effort went into the creation here. It's not just a big mod. If you feel like you've exhausted a lot of the gameplay in Rimworld and have already modded it to death, this is likely your next step, which can basically turn it into a different game. It's kind of like grabbing a Dark Souls DLC. You know it's going to be frustrating, but you're going to do it anyway if you love the series. I'm curious on your own experience if anyone out there has been surviving on the Rim with me. If you have any cool ideas or ideology suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comments. As always, I appreciate your time here with me today. Thanks for watching.